Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And I'm Danielle Crittenden, and welcome to the debut of Season 6. We're still here. Thank you, listeners.
We made it to 2020.
We made it to 2020, the new Roaring Twenties, the new decade. And we're going to kick it off with Dry January.
Oh, no, please stop.
I've become like some Victorian.
Yes, and it's becoming oppressive. And I happened to read an article about why drink is the secret to humanity's success. So, and there's also a study.
Oh, so you always come up with these
that shows
booze-positive
that
studies.
Non-drinkers are considerably less happy. The happiest drinkers are what they call local drinkers, people who go to local pubs and hang out with groups. Human beings in convivial groups drinking, that's the happiest configuration in the world.
So maybe it's drinking alone that's a problem?
Drinking alone. Although I like drinking with Izzy.
Well, that's not really drinking.
That's true.
Drinking with your dog, I think, is okay. I think if drinking with your cat is probably a problem.
That's a sign of...
That's a sign of serious problems. But no, it is January. Well, I've discovered it's Dry January because, as our listeners know, I did Sober October, but I thought Sober October was a thing. It is, but not in the United States. That seems to be a British-Canadian thing, although there is something called Sober September, which I just don't think has the same zing. And
I think the teetotalers are just pushing it. They're going to try to
make every month.
Every month.
Dry July goes better than Dry January. But no, of course, this is the moment where everybody, like if you go to a gym, like every treadmill is full for about 2 weeks. And then come February 1, it's empty again. So
because after the holiday season, you're in a state of horror at what you did and how many pounds you gained and what you drank. Although I didn't gain weight, but I did drink quite a bit of champagne. But what a fun holiday season.
That was so much fun. We had a lovely holiday. We spent some of it together.
We spent
our Chrismica together.
How do you say that?
Chrismica.
Chrismica.
We got in trouble. We were talking about Jews' contributions to Christmas in our episode just before the holidays, and I put up a video of us joking around about that. Whoa, did that?
Oh, because
bring out the anti-Semites.
Alt-right nuts.
I haven't had that. Like, look at those Jews boasting. This is just makes me so uncomfortable.
Credit for everything.
Obviously,
even Christmas.
So yeah, that was a little unnerving, I've got to say, but. No, we saw some great movies.
We saw Knives Out. I saw My Fair Lady. I saw the...
you saw the new... But it's not the new PC My Fair Lady where they changed anything. That was the original version under grumpy old George Bernard Shaw.
No, well, the original was grumpy. And no, whatever I saw was at the Kennedy Center, and it was a delight. It's one of the most charming plays, or musicals, ever made. And if there were some kind of time capsule that we wanted to put, and the world is destroyed and we want to leave vestiges of our civilization, My Fair Lady would have to be in there.
Well, and it wasn't ruined then by the fact that Eliza doesn't marry.
We don't know that she didn't. They left it. But it wasn't what I had worried was going to be the case. I'd heard that they had Me Too'd it. And she was furious, and there was no romance, which made no sense for the musical. It makes no sense. But anyway, I won't get carried away about that. But we saw Little Women.
I love Little Women.
We love that. And I was afraid that
it was going to be another politicization.
That it was going to be politicized, and there would be harangues. And there were a few, but not really. It was lovely. And
it was filmed like a painting. Like every scene was
shimmery and lovely and beautifully acted.
Yeah.
The whole thing was just...
Well, and there were
correctly
feminist aspects to it.
Well, no, because those are in the book. I mean, Louisa May Alcott
we think it's now thought that she was a lesbian.
Not interested in finding a husband.
Well, maybe a little more than that. But she was in that group with Thoreau and Emerson
Yes, the New England Transcendentalists, mostly because her father was a sort of, kind of something between a ne'er-do-well and a dreamer, very charming. People loved it, but he would not work. And he didn't believe that you should get
ahead of his time.
Any profits. If he would write something, he thought it was wrong to take the profits. And then he dragged the family to some godforsaken commune where he didn't work, but everyone had to work. They almost died because they had no food and they didn't believe in money. And so they weren't farmers. And so finally the mother...
problem.
So she had a problematic father and all of that. So it wasn't... The poverty of the Alcott family was much more severe than anything we saw in Little Women.
And so was it true that she then became the breadwinner through her writing, as it was in Joe in the women's story?
Yes, she had to save her family. It was a matter of life and death. I mean, she had to. And but she also believed in women's rights and saw
very much
stultifying conformity, and she did not conform. She was a tomboy and just had this spirit. She believed that men and women were... She was very religious. She was very Christian, but believed in the equality of all souls before their creator. And so she was, not a radical, but certainly very much believed in female emancipation.
Well, what was good about that movie was the mother...
Laura Dern.
Marmee, she was
so
good.
Beautiful.
Marmee anger, very suppressed anger at her husband, who at an older age had gone off as a medic in the Civil War and leaving these daughters and wife really to sort of fend for themselves.
Which is what actually happened to Louisa May Alcott.
It sounds like this was her way. The dad in the story was more following his idea of a noble cause, which would be more popular amongst her readers, but not if he had decided that money was stupid and was transcendental. That would be less popular.
Louisa May Alcott was certainly disappointed with her father, but she wasn't angry at all men. And you see tenderness towards Laurie and Laurie's father and Professor Bear. I mean, the men were lovely too. I mean, it's not
right. But if she had proclivities, I mean, I remember my eldest daughter Miranda read Little Women and got so angry at the end that she married, this older professor who was way less cuter, I think, in the novel than is portrayed on the screen. But I said, yeah, you know what? Go read Jane Austen. It always ends how it should. But when you realize of Louisa May Alcott's potential proclivities, it makes sense that she would sort of... I think she had this George Bernard Shaw reaction, was not to have her Joe marry at all, and she was persuaded by the publisher, you have to have her marry. And so she marries this professor guy, but everybody's heart is broken that she does not marry Laurie.
I'm the one reader who loved Professor Bear.
You married Professor
And then I married
Bear.
him. Dear reader, I married him. And my mother did too. We loved Professor Bear.
Older Professor Bear.
I married him.
Well,
funny.
Speaking of movies, it's award season coming up. You have gotten me into watching these. I'm so boring. I never used to watch these.
We're going to watch them all. Now, I was supposed to go to your house, but then it was cold.
It was for the Golden Globe.
So
and you're a shut-in.
And I'm a shut-in. Yeah. But the Academy Awards, as God is my witness, we are going to watch them.
I have the big TV.
She has a bigger TV and much more comfortable couches. I'm working on that. But I thought that the show, just as a piece of theater, the Golden Globes, was fantastic. You had all this tension. So there was Ricky Gervais, who was this sort of threatening. Actually, you compared him to my little dog, Izzy, when I have a dinner party. He was kind of charming, but then will attack a guest, be inappropriate.
And then I just felt like he had his 5 minutes of barking at everyone, and then he was hustled back into the kitchen.
Right,
as you
which
do
is I have to do with Izzy and put up these gates.
The kitchen. So they kind of gated him off. I didn't feel I had enough of Ricky Gervais because he's always so great.
He was so funny. And I went back and just watched some of my favorite segments from The Office. I just went down that rabbit hole. You can go on YouTube and get lost. And I just
in the original British version of The Office.
Yeah. There's some classic.
I could never watch that because, not that it wasn't brilliant, I could never understand them. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty used to listening to British accents, having grown up in Canada, where a lot of our TV was British. But there were a lot of dark mumbling. It was very dark, and British humor relies a lot on embarrassment.
It was all about him being.
I mean, Michael Scott in the American version was great, but you could watch him. Brits have this incredible knife-cutting awkwardness where it's almost too horrible to watch. It's so awkward. And I found that, but between the darkness, Ricky Gervais's Office was so much darker than the American one.
So they're having some, employee empowerment session where they bring in a workshopper, so well-meaning and earnest, and wants to, have them do some theater and, some exercises so they're better employees.
Yeah.
Ricky Gervais, David Brent, the character, is not having it. And at some point, he gets out his guitar and because he was sort of bragging that he was maybe going to be a rock star. And then you watch like the horrified people. If you were at a party or anywhere and someone brings out their guitar and they don't sing that well, and then it's not just one song. He keeps going on and on. And just the look on the faces, the shock. It's
excruciating because you got me watching, which was also a show that was a big winner at the Golden Globes. You got me watching Fleabag, which I literally started a few days ago, like a week ago. I'd not watched this British
very funny
comedy based on this very messed up single woman. David started to watch it with me. And it was so excruciting to watch. It was so awkward and embarrassing that he finally got up and left. And I kept going, and I love it. But it's a uniquely British thing, I think, that of embarrassment. That I think the things that this was why John Cleese was always so brilliant. Is the classic embarrassed British man. Like there is nothing worse. You could be shot on the battlefield, but God forbid you get embarrassed. And I think that's the sort of key.
Well, speaking of embarrassment, some of the dresses at the awards, I don't understand. I mean,
that was weird.
They were weird. It was kind of. Well, actually, there was an article in the New York Times that it's post-Harvey Weinstein fashion. So they're making a statement where they're going to be, they're all gorgeous and perfect and beautiful, but they do it in a way that sort of is sexual but also Amazonian and indifferent to the male gaze.
Well, that's right. No, I was actually we were texting. Yeah, we were texting during
these weird. I mean. Gwyneth Paltrow, what was that all about?
Well, it was
the naked dress.
Well, it was okay. Well, first of all, it's interesting because it was the night before the Harvey Weinstein trial started. So there was, of course, all these, Me Too comparisons, and Weinstein's no longer in charge. And I think that was that New York Times essay you were referred to. Right. So how are they going to dress? What is, actress dressing in the, Me Too era? And error is actually the right word.
Yeah.
And I think, do you remember, we watched Big Little Lies, right? And Laura Dern's character, Renata. There's a kind of... it's sort of corporate, but
angular.
But no, it's sexy, or it's cut so that
in your face, sexy.
In your face, sexy. But it's not. It's like Wonder Woman. It's like
right.
I'm wearing my body hugging, cleavage plunging dress, but it's fierce, and I'm going to
and don't you dare look.
And don't you dare look. And I'm going to kick your ass.
Yeah.
But please notice all the toning on my abs that I've done while I work out at the gym. And I was looking at those guys at the Golden Globes, the male presenters, next to these women who were, I mean, as you say, with Gwyneth Paltrow, you could see everything. Otherwise, this sort of Scarlett Johansson to my navel neckline that was wide, like everything was almost exposed.
But then the hair pulled back and weird makeup.
Right, but didn't you think, like, I felt for the male presenters, like they're trembling with the envelope going, I will not look at her chest. I will not look at her chest. God help me, don't look at her chest. But you're right. There's like, it's like an assertion of power, but without being sexy, even though everything is exposed.
Right. And
nothing. I guess there's nothing traditionally feminine about it. It's sort of like power feminine.
It's just power, Amazonian feminism, and you've got, and some of them had a lot of, like, there were a lot of puffy sleeves.
The sleeves were bizarre.
And one woman was wearing, an actress I haven't heard of, but she was wearing a Kelly green silk tent. It was a tent.
There were some tents, but there were always tents.
There are always tents, but this was a particularly hideous one. It was baffling. Well, they're also even a beautiful woman, Reese Witherspoon. So she has a beautiful white.
Yeah, she looked okay.
Except there was like a delicately folded napkin taped onto the front of it.
It was like she was wearing a very artfully folded, like when you go to those formal dinners and they've like made the napkins into fans or swans.
Right. And then you pinned it onto her dress.
It was a little like that. But yeah, that's the era. I mean, what is interesting under Harvey Weinstein, of course, they were all forced to wear the very beautiful, I mean, forced in quotes, dresses of his ex-designer wife. It was like Marchesa, I think, was her brand. And they were stunning, but they were told that they had to wear dresses by Harvey Weinstein's wife. So maybe that's a bit of a loss.
What did you think of Jennifer Lopez's bow?
Oh, her wrapped up. Well, at least that had implied that she wouldn't be adverse to a man pulling the bow apart. There was some possibility, whereas the others were, I think it is. It's like a female superhero look.
Someone once told me that men like anything they can untie or unzip.
Zippers are apparently key. But yeah, no, there's none of this. It was like, look if you dare.
Yeah.
And don't you objectify me, even though I'm showing you my breasts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
but there was something that happened that evening. It came over. I was looking at my Twitter account, and and people watching were invited to play the Golden Globes Gender Equality Bingo. And this will be part of my rant for our Patreon followers.
Tell them about your Patreon rant.
Because I am going to reveal...
This is new bonus content, people.
New bonus content where it's just, I'm going to hold forth on what annoyed me so much. And it has to do with this game. All I will say now is that you could play bingo.
This was for the Golden Globes.
This was for the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
And...
So instead of like sitting at home doing what's that, the shots where what's that?
Instead of shots, yep. You would, I guess you could progress in the game. The first time that an actor or actress thanks their mom in a speech. The first time that an actor or actress, aren't they supposed to say actor? The first time an actor talks about equal pay. Oh, we really wanted that. And get this. Women are asked about their newest projects on the red carpet. The idea...
As opposed to their dresses.
Yeah. So think about that. Why do we want to look at the red carpet? Because of the dresses. And because you have beautiful actresses who are just more fun to see than models because they're actresses and they're just more pronounced personalities. And it was wonderful to see the dresses and to find it. And it's an occasion for the fashion industry to have their moment in the sun. And now...
Well, also, to be fair, they also ask about men's dress now, too, because the Hollywood men get up to all kinds of weird interpretations of formal dress. They don't just wear, dinner jackets.
Someone came dressed as a swan, like that Icelandic singer in 2001. That was I don't know what that was. But the idea so what I will do in my rant is tell who sponsored this bingo game, because you won't believe it, and it's a big problem.
Okay, well, just as a reminder, first of all, in our new season, thank you to our patrons who help support us. We're launching on another site, so that's at Patreon. For those of you, some of you haven't wanted to go to Patreon for various reasons, we are launching on a place called ThinkSpot, which is a new site where you'll find a lot of free thinkers you can follow us, you can get access to all our media clips. We're going to start a newsletter, so you can see behind the scenes in the studio, find out about our upcoming guests, ask us questions, ask our guests questions, and at a certain level, if you subscribe, you get to hear She's Had Enough, which doesn't just refer to Christina, the amount of booze she drinks on this podcast, but what she's fed up with. Occasionally, I think theoretically I'm supposed to rant, but every time we really started this because
you don't get as upset.
You get so upset.
This bingo game.
I'm too chill.
Gender equity bingo for the who thinks of a thing like that? Just wait till you hear who it is.
Okay, so as we go into this new season, and by the way, welcome Ella. Ella is, of course, here with us.
Hello.
In the studio. Happy New Year, Ella. Okay, so this month we've got some wonderful guests coming up. One of the guests, we're also resuming our new monthly cocktail party, which is when we get just favorite guests, favorite new people. We invite them in and we just talk about whatever they want. Last month, before the holiday, we had Caitlin Flanagan and Ann Applebaum. That was a lot of fun. This month, we're going to have Emily Yoffe of The Atlantic and Megan Cox-Gurdon, author and also of The Wall Street Journal, who's wonderful. She's guest hosted when you've been away. They're coming in the end of January. I'm also really looking forward to guests. It's called an organization called Race to Dinner, which there are two women of color who come to your house if you're a white woman, and school you about your white privilege. And they've agreed to come on in February and
give us lessons?
Make us aware of our white privilege and what and people pay like a couple $1,000s to have.
Can I still have my Kir Royales?
Oh God, you're so white.
No.
You're so white, Christina.
No,
we're gonna have to cut
you know
this
what?
out.
We're
gonna have to cut this out. I don't know what you drink. Like white wine, rosé. Come on, how white is that?
No, I
So I don't
reject
know
all of these assumptions.
I don't know. We'll have to ask them, what should we drink so we're not quite so white and exhibiting. Anyway, I'm super excited about this.
I'm always looking for ways to grow, tips, life hacks
to grow, life hacks to wokeness. So looking forward to that, and yeah,
Robert Doar, the president of AEI, mentioned that he wanted to pop in and see us in action.
What? He's coming?
What?
Yes.
Right now?
What?
Well,
this is the
right
new
now.
president of AEI?
Yes.
He's my boss.
Your boss.
He's coming to the studio now?
There's a sign that says no beverages in the studio, and it's.
I think
we're drinking,
and I think champagne.
I don't want him to see it.
Okay, what should we do?
We put it under here. No, you know what? I'm going to pour it in my LaCroix.
LaCroix. Oh my God! Seriously, Ella, he's coming down. What?
He's coming.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think. Yeah. Okay. Let's move everything. When's he coming?
Now.
Oh my God. Christina, you're gonna get fired. He's new. He's not going to accept this
debauchery.
Oh
dear.
And this is like a studio where we recorded the American Enterprise Institute, which normally has very serious podcast, right?
They talk about deregulation of the cement industry and electoral college reform and
all kinds of things
micromanaging the ASDLP.
All acronyms, just acronyms of all kinds.
We don't have acronyms.
What should we do? Do you have a serious? Do we have
we need to talk about. We need to talk about.
There's
someone has to down the alcohol.
There's an AEI study that came out. We had it in our pile.
Okay, what does it say?
Okay. It's by Mark J. Perry,
economist from University of Michigan.
Yeah, and
Detroit.
This came out. Okay, so Ella, let us know if he shows up. We can be talking about this. He had this come out. You're going to laugh at me. I had a more woke reaction to this than you will have. So this went around, and we retweeted it on our Twitter feed, but he wrote, and this is disturbing, this study found that for every 100 girls/women, there are this many boys/men. So it was to show basically how much more women are succeeding over men. So for every 100 girls, for example, who take AP honors courses in art and music, there are 54 men. For every 100 girls who earn a bachelor's degree, there are 74 men. And it goes on. So
it goes on and on. I mean, some of the statistics are shocking.
And some of them, it's not just education. For every 100 women who are homeless, 154 men. So men are also having 200 men who have problems with alcoholism. 25 to 34, this is scary, years old who die, 232 for every 100-year-old woman.
For every 100 women who die on the job, there are 1,294 men.
And in prison, who are in federal prison, 1,333 for every 100 women. So that's disturbing. I was thinking, though, what if you looked at the statistics for every 100 men of women who take work off because they have to be at home because their childcare has fallen through?
Oh, well, there's no question, absolutely no question, I'm sure Mark would agree, that you could make a list of women's deficits. This has always been my message in my college lectures, that men do have privileges and women have special burdens. But the reverse is true, too. Women have privileges and men have burdens. It's a complicated mix.
Right.
And I think it's hard to say right now who's better off, men or women, but we have sort of a feminist establishment, and now the media and certainly the academy, they're on this bandwagon where they ignore men's burdens and deficits and only pay attention to those of women and sometimes exaggerate the deficits of women.
Well, Robert's here.
Okay. Let's we'll greet him and then we'll try to be serious.
Okay, let's be serious.
Be serious.
Although that was very serious what we just said.
Brought the champagne.
You brought champagne.
He brought champagne.
Is that what you're supposed to do on the show?
Yes.
I thought to celebrate the new year and to celebrate both of you and your.
Look at it, and it's nice champagne.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Straight from 17th Street. This is not AEI champagne.
I think I'm going to look forward to the new leadership.
I think so. Well,
cheers.
Here
we go. Wow. And glasses, too. This is way classier than we're used to in here, Christina. Normally we're like people in the streets drinking out of paper bags.
Well, I want to bring you up.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're now. Oh, but
now that we have him here, let's find out all about what it's like now being president of AEI.
Well, you said they used to drink all the time in the olden days when I
first came, there was that wine was served in the scholars' dining room.
I'm not starting a big thing here. I'm just celebrating you guys, okay?
He's just said, but I just want to say,
and it's the Femsplainers.
There were drinks at lunch, and they had the sherry at 3:00, and then cocktails.
This was Robert Bork,
Irving Kristol, Dr. Burns,
and they were all
they chain smoked
in their offices.
And in every room. I don't know how I didn't mind it. I smoked.
And they didn't live past 70.
Well, except Irving Kristol's wife, Gertrude Himmelfarb.
She's something else.
She just, we all mourn her. She just died last week. She was 94? 94, I think.
I think at least, maybe a little older. I went to the memorial service. She's one of my heroes. So I was very pleased to be there, and I was
Did she
reader of hers.
You?
Yeah. Well, tell us. You come from a background in New York City
and Washington,
and Washington, but you worked for Mayor Bloomberg, because I really want to find out about that now that he's in the presidential race. But your whole career has been in poverty and poverty studies, but as you say, much of it influenced by.
That's right.
Himmelfarb. So
maybe I was a welfare reformer. I'm a believer in work requirements and expectations and treating people who seek assistance as if they are people with assets and can do things and are capable and should be held to standards of morality. And that's what Gertrude Himmelfarb thought also. And she didn't think we should treat people as if they were inadequate or incapable. We should hold them up and ask them to strive. And that's what we did with welfare reform in New York City and around the country after the passage of the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, which inserted work requirements and had elements of talking about the importance of two-parent families and talked about personal responsibility. In fact, the act was called the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996. And so in some respects, that was very much informed by Gertrude Himmelfarb's work and beliefs, and I am a descendant of that. And
well, let's talk for our listeners who don't know her. Aside from being the wife of the famous scholar Irving Kristol, who our listeners might also not be that familiar with, but maybe tell us a little bit about why her work was important. She came up in this intellectual tradition of the 60s and
New York intellectuals,
but she made these.
Well, she was an historian of the Victorians,
right?
And so she was a historian in her own right and a writer in her own right of quite great grace and ability and long-standing contributions. I am not actually a deep expert in all of that. What I'm an expert in is the aspects of her writing that focused on issues concerning poverty. And she wrote about the poor laws in Great Britain and the deserving and the undeserving poor, and how there was an aspect of that approach that was lost in the modern times in the United States, and maybe there were some aspects of it we should bring back. And one of them was responsibility and expectation, in my judgment. Stigma or shame. She wasn't afraid to talk about those as being part of it okay to talk about. And so that's a little bit about her. She was terrific in all kinds of ways and contributed and wrote for a long time. But my exposure to her was in that context. Yuval Levin, our scholar here, has written beautifully about the broader picture. And I've been talking to my daughter, who is a great scholar of the Victorian writers, and the Brontes and Jane Eyre and Jane Austen, who was before that. And she knows about that, but I don't.
What's so wonderful in we call her B. Kristol, Gertrude Himmelfarb, but she was known as B. Kristol by her friends. So extraordinary in her work is, some would think, oh, well, she's talking about Victorian morals and it sounds so stuffy and sort of, old-fashioned. But it wasn't at all, because she wasn't talking about just everyday immorality. She was talking about demoralization. Societies where people just are so adrift and morally disconnected. And how do we bring that back? And the Victorians, they emphasized community and industry and family, and that could sustain a personality and a character and help people flourish. And it's so positive what she writes. So she was respected across the political spectrum. just because of the originality and depth of her scholarship.
Well, wasn't she also, I mean, there was a very, maybe compassionate is the wrong word, because I know she didn't like that.
She liked it. There were different kinds of compassion.
A humane approach, because I guess England with drink as, opioids and other substance abuse now. I mean, it's great to put work requirements, if somebody is able-bodied, but right now we're dealing with so much addiction, people who really can't work, who are too messed up to work. What and your this is your arena. What do you say to, we're looking at this generation of men who are able-bodied and of working age just falling off
disengaged.
So the substance abuse issue is an issue, and it's significant, and the opioid addiction problem is very significant and tragic and terrible, and the numbers have risen dramatically. But the low-income population is much bigger than those numbers. And when you treat all low-income or struggling Americans or Americans seeking some form of assistance as if because of this substance abuse problem they're incapable of working or can't work, you really are, defining deviancy down, and you are going to actually not get the kind of work and effort and contribution that they can provide. And so I believe in setting a standard of expectation, and for those that are able-bodied and can, they will. Mm-hmm. And then for those that really struggle with a disability or a substance abuse, a sort of paralyzing substance abuse problem, then there will be a way to address that in a more targeted and effective way. But it's a different number. It's a smaller number. There is a tendency on the part of conservatives and liberals to say about all people who seek government assistance, well, they're all broken. They're all derelict. They're all incapable. They all are dealing with barriers. And the fact is that's not really true. They all have challenges and their difficulties, but they are, if we expect and treat them as if they have assets and potential, they will show that. And that's what happened in welfare reform, by the way. Is that
tell us about what you saw in New York.
So many people, when we said to them that we expect you to go to work, they said, okay, I'll go to work. I can do that. The people that got people jobs,
how did you find them, like in a practical way? You were sort of boots on the ground in this, in the commissioner of...
It's called the Human Resources Administration, but basically we are a government agency. We had offices where people came, and we changed the name from income maintenance centers to job centers, where the focus was our objective is to help you get a job, not to help you get on assistance. And again, in some cases, we and our various case managers helped them move to employment by placing them in a job training program or attaching them or connecting them to an employer. But in many, many cases, people said, oh, if that's the rules, I can do that. I can go get a job. And whether it's Robert Rector or me or Ron Haskins or others who've written about this, it's called the smoke-out effect. If you set a standard and expectation, it turns out large groups of people can meet that, but just they never were asked before. And nobody was ever following up to see that they were complying with the rules when you had rules that weren't followed. So the main effect of welfare reform in the United States was that the government said, we expect of you, and we'll help you get into employment if you need help, but we're expecting you to show up, be at a certain place. Mm-hmm. If you're not there, you're going to get a notification that says your benefits are at risk, and if you still don't respond, we're going to terminate your benefits. And some people had to go through that process and deal with that, but many, many others just said, fine, I'll go get a job. And employment rates went up. So the percentage of never married mothers who were working rose from 50% or below 50% to more than 70%. And child poverty rates dropped because once you go to work, your income rises. There are benefits in the government that we provide that support work, the Earned Income Tax Credit, certain forms of public health insurance for children, child care assistance. So it wasn't like we were off assistance completely, but you were persuaded and encouraged that the real way to escape poverty was to get a job, and if you needed assistance on top of those earnings, good, we'll help you with that. But we're not going to just provide you assistance without any attention to your employment. And that was enormously successful. Child poverty dropped dramatically in New York. It dropped around the country. Conservatives sometimes don't like to accept victory when they get it because, things are always bad.
Right.
American society is just so terrible and we're broken. But the fact is, we made real progress as a result of this combination of requiring work and rewarding work for low-income families. And in my judgment, there's an element of that kind of expectation, that sort of stigmatization of welfare that isn't too far from some of the things that B. Crystal wrote about.
Now there's some revisionist history going on, in my opinion, where people on the left increasingly are just acting as though the Welfare Reform Act was a disaster, and any politician, especially the Clintons associated with it, are just considered reactionaries. And I'm just wondering, do they remember that, like, the perverse incentives that were in place? You were encouraged to have more children out of wedlock, to have a man, in the home. You could the father in the home. You could lose your benefits.
Well, they had a chance. President Obama had a Democratic-controlled Congress. He was the president for 8 years. They never made any real effort to reform President Clinton's welfare reform at all, and they didn't succeed because the vast majority of the American people like it. And so, it's true. The Democratic Party no longer really celebrates President Clinton's achievement there. That's true. And it's too bad. And it says a lot about what's happened to their party. But the fact is, it's still the law of the land. To give you an odd fact that people forget is the dollars that we invest in that program that was reformed are the same, the actual same, not the same in real terms, the same as they were in 1996, roughly. So we've had like a 30% savings in inflation-adjusted dollar. We cut a program dramatically, and yet child poverty went down. So, they don't like it, and there's an aspect of it that their party rhetoric doesn't want to accept or rejects, and they've sort of disavowed their support of Bill Clinton. But the fact is, they didn't change it.
How do you explain then something I alluded to earlier, that we are seeing this rise of, particularly with men who are seemingly able-bodied in their prime working years, a huge increase in the numbers of men, between 24 and 50 or whatever it is, who are just simply not working. And as you say, we can't just write that off. Why are they not working?
Because the program I just described is for households with children in them. Right. And so the adult who we're dealing with is often the mother. Yeah. And so they got exposed to this work requirement and work support world. So the benefits we provide if you do go to work are more generous for a household where children are in them because they have more needs if you go to work. The guys who are not in those households don't get the benefits of a strong work requirement program because they're not in that program, and they don't get the benefits of the work supports that come with a low-wage job that isn't enough for them to live on. And there are lots of reasons for that, but it's true that we reformed welfare for low-income households with children in them, and the adults associated with those households were mostly women and mothers. But we didn't do much for the guys.
And does this worry you? Does this worry
absolutely.
you?
And I've written about this. I wrote a piece for AEI back when I was in the Poverty Center program called Getting Men Back to Work that was inspired by Nick Eberstadt's work. Right. Yeah, that we have a gap in our social services system and our culture about guys that is distressing. And we ought to pay attention to those problems and address them. I happen to think that there are programs that they are participating in, like disability and food stamps or SNAP, that don't come with a work requirement, and they should. So I've said that if you're an able-bodied adult male, no kids in the household, and you apply for food stamps, we should give you food stamps, but we also should say we got to help you get a job. We don't do that in the United States, and we should. And we expect you to get a job. We should do that. We don't do that. We don't do that in public health insurance. You can apply for public health insurance if you're an able-bodied adult and you just say, look, I don't have a job. The public health insurance provider's modus operandi is to say, my job is to get you your Medicaid card. Help you get a job? Oh, no, I don't do that because I'm not in the business of enforcing standards or morals. I'm only in the business of providing aid. And I think that's not helpful to the full person. It gives them health insurance. That's true, and that's a benefit. But it doesn't do all that person really needs. And in the disability programs, it's particularly bad. So Nick has shown that the extent to which disability roles have grown in this population, and again, they prove some sort of disability that makes it so that a doctor determines that the job they used to have they can't do, and so they get a benefit. But the benefit comes with a rule. You can't work, because the reason you're getting it is because you're supposed to not be able to work. But just because you couldn't do the job that involved, driving a truck or lifting a box, or doesn't mean you can't do some other kind of employment. It doesn't mean you don't want to work. But the rules of the game are you're not allowed to work, and we're not even allowed to encourage you to work or help you get to work. So, yeah, I think, and by the way, you've raised substance abuse. The people that I worked with in New York City who really dealt with people who were struggling with substance abuse and addiction absolutely believed in employment and engagement in activities as being a vehicle to help people getting sober. But the rules of some of our programs don't allow that kind of, and that comes with requirements, not just I want you to go to this program to get assistance or get off of drugs. But if you don't, your benefits are at risk. We did that in New York. Mm-hmm. We said to people, it looks like you have an issue. We're going to refer you to a counselor or a program. If you didn't show up at the program, we terminated your benefits. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with that kind of policy. And I think it drove people to make better choices on their own. And led to better outcomes, which is the goal. The goal is not to sign people up. It's to reduce poverty or to reduce substance abuse. And you have to have a program that mixes both standards and responsibility requirements and support and assistance.
See, to me, a program you're describing is more, it's effective compassion. It's effective altruism, and not just throwing money at a problem and not addressing the deeper issue. And yet somehow conservatives who support reasonable approaches like that are considered cruel, and you don't care about the poor. And I've been reading about efforts to address the homeless problem in San Francisco, in Portland, in Seattle. And it's the situation is untenable. It's making neighborhoods my own sister lives in Portland, and there's a park near her house. It's next to a school, and homeless people, most of them either drug addicts or mentally ill or both, have set up a little tent city next to and there are syringes, and there are no facility. And yet her neighbors and others are having a terrible problem because the powers that be in Portland, this is Portland, Oregon, are saying, oh, well, you're being, she was accused,
So I work for Michael Bloomberg in the city of New York, and we had, on a per capita basis, the lowest street homeless population in the country because we had a very extensive outreach effort on people who set up camp or tried to sleep or rough sleep or sleep on the street or put up signs and said, I need help. We sent people out and said, you need help? We'll give you help, but we're going to take you to a place where you can get help. We had a good partnership between social services providers and the law enforcement community. And as a result, street homelessness reached record lows in New York and far lower than many of these other places that have an attitude like you're describing. So I'm with you. I think the idea that people that camp out on the street and put up a sign that says they need help or they want you to give them pocket change or money, and that we should just not address that is not helpful to them. And so the policies that we had in New York were more likely to address it and to do something about it. And to the extent that cities have gone away from that policy, I think they've seen a spike in street homelessness. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to have a place where people can go to get shelter if they don't have shelter. But you don't just say, oh, it's okay, or I can't do anything about that, or they have a right to that. That I don't think that's true, and I don't think, I don't know what he'll say on the campaign trail, but when he was mayor, the Mayor Bloomberg didn't think that either.
Do you, and I know like think tanks are certainly supposed to be nonpartisan. So I'm not asking whether you would endorse him or not endorse him. But as a leader, what did you take away from working with Mayor Bloomberg?
He was a very good manager. He was a very good manager and very devoted to the city and very devoted to the people that work for him. He was very loyal down. He was a taskmaster. He read his brief carefully, and he read his graphs that you showed him carefully. And if you had something wrong with them, he let you know it pretty quickly, and that was always kind of funny. I have had some bad moments with graphs and Mayor Bloomberg. So yeah, he's a great leader. And you're right. I don't. I'm totally nonpartisan. I don't endorse any candidate. I think he'll be good for the Democratic Party and for a race among Democrats. And he certainly has, 3 terms of mayor of New York is, that's a pretty solid experience. Successful mayor of New York.
I find him so impressive whenever I hear him. And he has issues that I worry about and sort of due process and free speech on campus. He's been wonderful. He's very intelligent. I think that if he were in the debates, I hope he appears in the debates because I think he'd win because he's got common sense, which is so absent from.
Yeah, he's not fast on his feet in a public setting.
Oh, that I didn't know.
You should know. I mean, I think he's great, but he's not. He's more of a manager technician than he is a showman.
Yeah.
And it's noted there was
that could be refreshing in this moment in time.
There's a story today that apparently now the Democratic candidates who he is running against are mad that he won't participate in the debates. And the reason is that they want to show, they'd like to get him on the stage with them and show, and maybe they think that there's a weak spot there and they want to expose it. But I'm sure he'd do it if he could. But apparently, the standards, you have to raise a certain amount of money and have a certain poll data. And since he's not taking money, he's only just spending his own.
Giving it to himself.
He doesn't qualify. So it remains to be seen whether we'll ever see him in a Democratic debate or any debate. But he's certainly running.
Well, the other day he organized some kind of event with Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and so the far left, she's a heroine to the far left, and they were saying, "Oh, why is she doing that?" And she said, "Hey, I'm a capitalist. I want to be rich someday," and they're horrified by that. And he wants to work with her, and it made me like them both better.
I always feel when you're around, like, not that I'm so often around billionaires, but if I were to be around Mike Bloom, maybe Stacey Abrams for the same reason, I always feel like you could just give me a little cash and you wouldn't even notice it.
Well, I think
you could give me like a lot of cash from my point of view, and I'd spend it so well, but they never seem to do that.
We could go on a shopping
I know.
spree.
We would have much more fun with it. But okay, so you're sitting atop this now think tank. What would you say are the biggest issues facing us right now that we need to pay more attention?
Well, I want the American Enterprise Institute to be a place where the tensions in the conservative movement can get worked out. That we can be a convener and a participant in the discussion.
Do you have a boxing ring down here?
And there are some people that here in the building that we're in that some agree with some agree on many things, and some disagree. And I think that's good. So I want us to be neither never Trumpers nor Trump cheerleaders.
Yeah.
I happen to think that the big 4 issues that, and there are others that were challenged by the election of President Trump for conservatives, are ones that AEI has done work on and should continue to do work on. And so they are entitlements, free trade, immigration, and America's role in the world. In a lot of respects, President Trump's election and takeover of the Republican Party challenged sort of classic sort of democratic liberalism, conservative views on free trade, for instance, or a willingness to allow for more open borders or increase immigration or America's role in the world, most importantly. I mean, the president campaigned on really challenging the idea that America should play a strong role in the world. So while I think he won that debate by winning the election, those issues are not resolved. And so I want AEI to be a place where we can think through these issues and have scholars who participate in the public debate, national discussion, and help us move forward more together. And so there are others as well. I mean, healthcare is still unresolved, climate change and what's happening in the environment. But AEI's role is to be a place where we can bring people who believe in free markets and free people and limited government and economic opportunity for all and a strong American role in the world. Those are our basic principles. But there's a lot there's a lot of ground in all of that, who can do that work in a way that contributes to civil discourse. And I think ideas matter. I think ideas like, Charles Murray's Losing Ground made an effect on changing our welfare policy in the United States, and there are lots of other examples of that. And I think that through those good ideas and the effective expression of those good ideas, we can bring our country forward going, as we come out of this period that we're in. Right now, we're very divided, and I think, division's not all bad. Sometimes that's good. But I do think we have to resolve these issues and see if we can find a place to go forward together.
When I came from university to a think tank, in my university, there was very little political diversity. It was just almost everyone was on the same sort of left to far left team. When I came to Washington to AEI, immediately there were all these events. AEI working on something with Brookings and AEI and the Urban Institute. And I think what people don't realize is in the think tank world, we're constantly talking to people from, that might have a different political orientation. And some of the best reports that are done at AEI have been done with scholars, and you figure out where you disagree, how you can work around it. And there have been...
Yeah, and I worked on some of those, not maybe the best ones, but I've worked on several of them, all concern my particular issue. And they do give you ideas that allow the country to pass legislation and sign legislation and change policy. And, we've got a lot of divisions, but there are things we can work out together. And
I think this policy of not bringing booze back to the lunchroom, I think you may want to reconsider that. But you come from a kind of warrior background, and this is something...
Before you say who it is, I want to read a passage about someone.
Okay.
And then...
Oh, does he have to guess who it is?
You have to guess who it is.
Okay.
This is a real hero, and this is President Obama's description during a ceremony. It was a scorching day in 1963, and Mississippi was on the verge of a massacre. The funeral procession of Medgar Edgars had just disbanded, and a group of marchers were throwing rocks. They were defiant. They were heavily armed policemen. So suddenly, out of nowhere, a white man in shirt sleeves, hands raised, walked toward the protesters and talked them into going home peacefully. And that man was...
John Doar, my dad.
My goodness. Yeah. He was a civil rights hero.
So he came to Washington in 1960 at the very end of the Eisenhower administration to work as the first assistant in the Civil Rights Division at a time when the Civil Rights Division had not yet become the center of all the activities that it would become in the mid to late 60s. And he did some work in some important voting rights cases in East Carroll Parish, Louisiana, and Fayette County, Tennessee. And when the Kennedys came to town, they took a look at his files, and they got to know him. And they said, well, you may be a Republican from Wisconsin, but you seem like an awfully good guy. It might have helped that he was Irish Catholic. And they said, stick around. And then he became really the face of the federal government in the South as they pursued voting rights cases and other school desegregation cases. And Dad escorted James Meredith into Ole Miss. And he also prosecuted the case of the 3 boys who were killed in Mississippi, the Mississippi burning case. So he had a great record, but really he wouldn't say it was him. It was the Civil Rights Division of the United States Justice Department that contributed, along with Dr. King and people of good faith and good judgment and patriotism, to changing our country for the better, I think, in the 1960s when it comes to civil rights. And President Obama wanted to honor him. He gave him the Medal of Freedom.
Yes.
which was a nice day for the Doar family.
Well, it's funny. Over the holiday, I was hanging out with Elizabeth Drew, who's been on our program, but, great reporter of Watergate and written about Watergate and was there at Watergate. And apropos of just sort of talking about Watergate, she said, the only real hero in all of that was John Doar.
There you go. That's very good.
She said the others, they get credit.
That's right. We love the Doar family, Elizabeth Drew. She wrote a great book called Washington Journal, Impeachment Summer. Dad, after the Civil Rights Division, he left the Johnson administration before it was over to go to Brooklyn and set up a program up there. And then in 1973, the very end of 1973, when the Democrats in the House of Representatives decided that there was enough going on with regard to President Nixon that impeachment was something they ought to consider, they recruited this Republican from New York, now from New York, to come down and be the lead counsel for the inquiry into President Nixon's behavior. And it's interesting, that inquiry took place. Dad was hired on Christmas weekend in 1973. I remember when, the reporters from the Baltimore Sun called our house and said, "Is John Doar there?" And we had to say, "Well, I don't know who you're talking about." But in any case,
well, my dad's here, but I don't know.
Yeah. And he started then, and that went all the way through July. So that's what is that, a 7-month inquiry. And in contrast to what's taking place now, where they sort of rushed impeachment in a month and a half or less, they did it in a way that earned or won, or however you want to look at it, 7 Republican, very conservative Republicans supporting 3 articles of impeachment against President Nixon, and he was certain to be impeached and removed from office before he resigned. And they did it in a way that earned the respect and affection of the American people. And I happen to think that Elizabeth Drew is right. The key player in the House Judiciary Committee's impeachment inquiry was John Doar. He was the one who put it together. He's the one that preserved the bipartisan outcome that it got. And I'm very proud of that as well.
But in Washington today, do you think, even if, let's say, impeachment was handled differently, I mean, you talked about this just in the scholars here, that you could ever get that kind of bipartisan support right now?
Well,
or anything, really.
Actually, well, it depends. I think if you take the time and the facts are on your side, you can, of course, win bipartisan support. The other problem with the impeachment situation now, it seems to me, is that the facts aren't as persuasive. I don't happen to agree with some people that said this is worse than Nixon. It's not even close. President Nixon was impeached for a pattern and a practice and a pattern over a long period of time involving himself and his aides and subordinates in doing multiple things that either abused power or obstructed justice. And they really abused power and they really obstructed justice. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about it in a couple meetings and then not have it happen. It went on a long period of time. So there was a collection of evidence that was quite persuasive that reasonable people would agree on. And so I'm not entirely sure that if the facts were stronger and the evidence was compiled in a more effective way and a real effort was made to have a process that gained the confidence and respect of people in the middle, that an impeachment couldn't be successful. But it may not be that in this case the facts warrant it. And I should say one other thing. One of the things that they talked about the impeachment inquiry in Nixon time, and it may even be that Elizabeth Drew wrote about this, is that Dad used to say, one thing we decided is you can't impeach the president for something he did on a Wednesday afternoon. And I'd say, what do you mean? And he'd say, well, you can't impeach him for one bad thing on a Wednesday afternoon, a mistake or a stupid comment or an error. It doesn't make any sense. It has to be, the founders wanted impeachment to be a rare, unusual thing that was only used when the president had clearly gone outside the boundaries of what a president's powers work and responsibilities were. And that couldn't happen, in a couple hours on a Wednesday afternoon.
Did with Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, well, I
actually though.
Wait, the vast majority of the American people didn't think he should be impeached either.
No.
But, so that was a mistake as well.
That was a mistake.
In the history of presidential impeachments, there have been 2 disasters, and maybe a third we're in the middle of, and only 1 success. And not to overdo this, but you brought him up. Dad was responsible for the 1 success.
He died in 2014. Do you, I mean, obviously you think about him a lot, but do you think about him a lot right now with the impeachment and also with your new role? Does he...
Well, yeah, I definitely think about him a lot because he loved, he loved public service. He loved the country. He loved politics. He wanted all of us to participate in, and he had big ambitions for us. So I think he'd be happy that I was engaged in the national discussion and that I was coming to Washington to do a job that he thought was relatively important. But he would remind me also that he had a lot of belief in holding the big jobs, being the Attorney General of the United States or being, a senator or a congressman. So he might be a little concerned that I was sort of, in this ivory tower over here at AEI. And
not standing out, facing down the lines of
right.
protest.
So I have
might yet be.
Yeah. So he'd like it. He'd think it was kind of interesting and fun and fine. But he, he was a trial. He was a United States government attorney. He was a assistant attorney general.
Was he away all the time? Did you?
Oh yes. So Dad was away 225 days out of the year I was born in 1961 until he left the Justice Department in 1967. So all of my childhood was he was not around a lot, and it was a very big strain on our family. And
how many children in the family?
4.
4.
So he was away a lot. He was totally focused on, even when he left the Justice Department and did other jobs, he was always totally focused on his job or what he was doing, what he was doing for work. He was a great dad. My parents divorced, and he became an even better dad after they split up. But he wasn't always around.
Something I've been wanting to ask you about these. There seems to be a tendency among young people, especially young women these days, to turn against the free enterprise system. And I see these polls, and it shows growing numbers endorse socialism.
It's true of men, too, like youth, basically.
Youth, but it's more women than men.
Yeah.
And then you have magazines like Teen Vogue that are proselytizing Marxism.
They did an article on Karl Marx,
yes.
Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a sign that AEI is not being as effective as it should be. I mean, if we've got to get
certainly
better
a Teen Vogue.
Yes, we need to promote our ideas more aggressively on college campuses and in the community and the popular culture. I also think it's a result of the certain changes in the economy and certainly a big change in the way the academy is run and the way educational institutions are run. And that's why AEI's got to be on its game. And we do college campus stuff. You all do podcasts. And
Christina knows college
all
campuses
those things
pretty well.
So it's distressing. I'm not as discouraged by it. I think we will prevail. I think the argument is so strong against socialism and for free markets and free people, and the record is so solid that the American people are smart enough to not be bought into that, and in the long run, we will continue to be a free country with free markets and free people and free elections.
Well, it's also not surprising to bring the conversation back to the Victorianism at the beginning, which is, I mean, now as then, that when you're young and you see this huge gap, and I mean the billions and billions that wealthy people now have, you can see a certain skepticism about their future and certainly the widening gap between.
Yeah,
non-wealthy.
I'm a poverty fighter, so I focus on helping people get above the poverty line. And then sometimes I talk about, and I'm going to something now to talk about upward mobility, helping people.
We should follow you there. I'd
want
like to know about that.
You'd like some upward mobility too. Well, that's good. But I'm not one who stresses too much, and I don't think the people that I served in New York City in the social services office really are that focused on the distance between them and you or them and Mike Bloomberg. They really just want to get a chance to get ahead and to take care of their families. And a lot of Americans respect and admire living in a system that allows for people to be very successful because they do really outstanding work or spectacular inventions or are great athletes. So I know one of our political parties is making a lot of emphasis on inequality. It's not something
Except they may just be about to nominate a billionaire, so that's...
Yes, they may. Although they also may nominate a socialist from Vermont or
who's a millionaire
or a
millionaire.
Well, I guess he is, or a former.
That's very 1975.
So this was great. I do have to go to another event.
Well, we are so honored. Policy. Not only you
graced us with your appearance,
but you
I've been
with champagne.
My wife listens to your podcast quite a lot, and she's told me about this jovial atmosphere here, and I felt it was important for me to contribute in a nice way. And you're part of our community and team, and I thank you for doing what you do, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Go talk about upward mobility.
Yes, thanks.
What a lovely discussion with Robert, and I'm so relieved that he brought champagne.
Oh my goodness, I thought we were so busted. I thought I
feel so validated.
Well, he pointed out too that he had not expensed this bottle of champagne.
No, he went out of the office and bought it at a store for us. It was so nice.
That's very sweet. Well, I'm so, I think we can take relief that his wife likes the program. Thank you, Mrs. Doar, because, as long as his wife likes us, I think we're safe down here with our,
antics.
With our very serious topics like who's wearing what on the red carpet. I think we're okay.
No, but we had a serious point to make about because
fashion. Anyway, we have some. Can we call it hangover listener reaction from previous? Ella, do you want to?
We do. So this is from Nerds of Wisdom. He says, well, I assume it's a he. Hey, Femsplainers. Love the latest episode. As one of the people very much caught up in the modern board game revolution, I would be happy to help with explaining what's happening in the industry. It was really revitalized with games like Settlers of Catan and, I hope I pronounced this right, Carcassonne. These games were designed in Germany and became known as German games. As the industry grew, other nations got on board. I got that. And they became known as Euro games. The hobby was picked up in the United States, and a style of game known as Ameritrash became popular. American games are more thematic and luck-based, while Euro games have less player interaction and more resource management. We'd be happy to talk more on this topic as it is a passion of mine.
Okay, I think that felt random, but we have in the past talked about last season how younger people are playing more board games. So I think Nerds of Wisdom has very nerdishly explained.
I respect that. So my parents and their friends played canasta and bridge.
Yeah.
And first of all, these games are hard. And I think and once you get to a level of proficiency or excellence, it's a real challenge. I remember we had a friend, I won't name him, but he played bridge. He played it with Bill Gates online. These geniuses would come online to play online bridge. I won't say it. So I'm open to that. But I wonder how it compares to the game we played on Christmas.
Right, we talked about it. We tweeted about it, Celebrity. But I think it's the same idea. When when we're with family, we also play dominoes, which isn't really a board game, but gets vicious.
See, that's what's fun.
My kids and David play Settlers of Catan all the time when we're together. No, I think I love this idea that people are, we're all trying to find ways, even, and maybe especially younger people, to get away from our phones.
Get away from the phones and play. And a lot of people in my family play chess.
Yeah, but you got a super smart.
I got a logician and a philosopher.
That's nice. Well, thank you, Nerds of Wisdom. But yes, Settlers of Catan and there has been a revival. That's really true. So thank you.
So we have more listener reaction from our latest episode, our season 5 finale with Susan Rice. It's just a username, so I'm not really sure who sent this, but they said, your discussion with Susan Rice was a terrific and refreshing episode of the Femsplainers. Absolutely best by far since you started. When I read the episode description, I rolled my eyes and was going to skip it. I love you gals, but as a conservative, I was beginning to tire of the obvious anti-Trump bias that comes through your podcast, despite your pro forma disavowal of partisanship. Hosting an Obama apparatchik, I think I pronounced it right. Apparatchik, thank you, Christina, seemed like more of the same imbalance. But Susan was a fabulous breath of fresh air. Her family history, past and present, was riveting and compelling.
I'm so thrilled by that letter.
I love that letter.
Despite the fact that things were, we are women and Trump does not poll well amongst women. But that was I was really happy with that because I think we talked about this a little before she came on, that, that these public political figures of whatever party, you have strong perceptions of them, even though you don't know them. And she had written a memoir, which by politicians can always be just like something they do because they're going to run for office and they want.
Most of them are unreadable.
Unreadable, that you give them to people, but you never actually read them.
Bromides and pointless cliches.
And
hers was so real.
It was so real. It was so interesting. And we both had the same reaction because I think we felt a little bit like that listener.
Well, I thought she was going to be too liberal for me and maybe PC. Not at all.
Yeah, and very closed mouth, but it was very candid. And she likes red wine too. So it was a lot of fun. I've had, by the way, just even coming down to the studio, young woman upstairs near your office raced up to me to tell me how much she had loved that interview too. So I'm pleased. Thank you. I'm glad. Even though you may not like our views on Trump, which we try never to talk about, is keeping what Robert Doar said about dialogue, amongst everybody. And thank you. I'm glad. That was a good one too. At Politicon, remember after we spoke and you had Yang Gang supporters immediately.
Bernie Bros
in front of the Trump supporters. So I think you're doing something right if, we're getting everybody. And we did get one letter where somebody just canceled listening to us because he said we were way too liberal. But, can't win the hearts of everybody. So sorry.
Liberal. We're fair. We're open-minded.
No, we're part of
the...
we're obviously...
Fake news, Leviathan.
Yeah. Well, we have won the heart of Dan. Who says, I'm just dropping you a note to tell you how much I appreciate your show. At first, I did not think I would. I thought by the title there would be over-the-top feminism. I took the chance because I wanted to challenge myself to ideas that I'm not familiar or comfortable with. Instead of putting you in a category and locking the box, I decided to find out why I did not like you. To my surprise and amazement, I am not a hater of your podcast. I imagine you get enough negative emails, so I thought I would drop a note of encouragement. Keep up the good work.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
It's so nice.
It's good to start the new year on a happy note.
It's like my Twitter followers. I have a lot of followers, but a lot of them are hate followers who just...
Really?
Yeah.
What sort of person does that?
I wonder. Because I'll write something and then I'll get this vicious attack and I'll think, who is this person? Then I see they follow me. Why? But I think it's to monitor in case I, say something they can cancel me.
Yeah, like you like rosé or something, and then you're just going to be canceled for your whiteness.
What are they going to do to me at my age?
All right, any more, Ella?
Yeah, so this is from Andreas. He says,
guys.
Yeah. I'm a regular listener of the Femsplainers podcast and just wanted to tell you that as someone who has been falsely accused of rape and is still living through the aftermath of seeing my reputation destroyed by the media and being fired from my employer despite being acquitted in court, I'm immensely grateful that there are still voices of reason and sanity out there. As a millennial, I can tell you that I wish I were part of a generation where feminism was concerned about equality, and not nowadays sometimes paranoid version where too many women in their late 20s to mid-30s believe that we live in a rape culture and that any sex one has one regrets is tantamount to rape. Thank you for expressing your commonsensical opinions, with the vast majority of people certainly agree with. Just maybe not the more radical ones on Twitter. Best wishes from Austria.
From Austria?
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you. International.
Oh, and I'm sorry to hear about the false accusation. I mean,
I hate those cases, but right now, young men have been fighting back, and there have been over 100 lawsuits, and they're winning.
Well, public opinion, I think, is overwhelmingly against anything that is seeming to be unjust or unfair.
Kangaroo courts.
And people are worried. I mean, the thing to remember is, I mean, we try, I mean, I guess a regular theme here is about saying women have sexual agency too. And that doesn't mean that they should be subjected to anything they don't want or agree to.
But neither should men.
But neither should men.
And sometimes women... People are, I mean, men and women, this is the key point I try to make in my writing, is that I just don't think either sex has a monopoly on vice or virtue. And each is capable of horrible pathological behavior. Men are more violent, but women are capable of a lot of relational violence, psychological violence. So good and evil, it's not the unique possession of one sex. It's a mix, a complicated mix.
Well, I also just think there's this tragic breakdown between men and women going on in confusion. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we're exaggerating it. We'll love to hear from you about that. But just the difficulties that the sexes are having. And at minimum, we encourage not pitting each other against each other so
understanding and giving each other a break. And what I long for and miss is being able to joke about one another in good humor about your foibles.
Jokes.
I know, my God.
Jokes. All right, Ella, is that...
We have one more.
Ooh.
This is from Tim.
Tim, it's a full mansplainer listener react this week. Come on, ladies, step up to your computers.
So he says, "Hello, Danielle and Christina. My name is Tim, and I am a mansplainer in my early 30s. I love your podcast. I find you both intelligent and charming, and I always learn a lot from you and your guests. I get lots of exposure to perspectives very different than mine. I've listened to every episode, but there was one I could not finish."
Oh, okay. Well, you set it up with such praise, Tim, that now whatever you say is fine. Okay, go ahead. We can take it.
I come from humble beginnings, and there's one issue that occasionally gets brought up on the show that is very meaningful to me. Unfortunately, this issue isn't typically considered a problem or is just shrugged away. You even had as a guest someone who wrote a book called In Defense of Elitism.
Joel Stein.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Elitism is just as ugly as racism or sexism to me, as I grew up with its boot on my neck. Everything that was important to my family was looked down upon by the elite, from the clothes we wore and made ourselves, to the cars we drove and fixed ourselves, and even the way we expressed our spirituality. It is a deeply personal issue for me, and I feel compelled to relate to you how heart-wrenching and soul-crushing it was to listen to someone like Joel Stein on your show. His prejudice wasn't very funny to me, and he came off to me as far too ignorant to be on your show. Despite that, I want to stress how much, again, I love your show.
Well, we did love Joel Stein. I don't know what he said that upset him, but
I think maybe it was the concept, because Joel Stein, it should be said, and that was recorded at Politicon.
Joel Stein was sympathetic to that point of view.
No, that's right. The point of his book, and it was sort of tongue-in-cheek in defense of elitism, was that he went and spent time in the Trumpiest county of all of America, which was in Texas. And he went there and he's a humor writer. So this was
a sweet guy,
a very sweet guy, and very funny. And we were talking to him at Politicon. That was a live or recorded of a live interview, and he spent it was a lot of self-mockery of himself amongst the Trump voters, and it was like this learning experience for him. And then he went and made fun of the elite supporters of Donald Trump.
And despaired of their ignorance of the people that he'd met in Texas.
Well, and both sides. But the in defense of elitism was really in defense of expertise, not in looking down at people, which I think is how our listeners interpret it. But, I'm sorry to hear that you not feel that way about our show, but are made to feel that way about your situation.
Yeah. But I do think there are lots of people in the country, sometimes it even includes me, that when you listen to people from the far left, it's not just that they simply disagree with you. They have contempt for you.
I would not put this on either. I would not make this political. Can we just say there are
contemptuous people on both sides? That's probably true.
Speaking of a white woman of privilege who is about to be schooled on this.
I'm going to be schooled.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, look, I've seen, I think the problem on the right, and of course there are problems on the left, but problems on the right are this idea, and I've spoken to some of my conservative friends, that the left are American-hating, want to bring communism, don't love their... there's a each side, the problem right now that we have with partisanship is each side is seeing the other as a cartoon.
Right.
And Joel Stein was trying to bridge that gap and write in a very funny way about
the divide and be a bit of an ambassador going back and forth to each side.
Right. But that may have been lost in translation. So that's our fault. That's our fault. But thank you. I'm glad to have you as a listener. Thank you.
So I just want to say we're going to end the show soon. We've been carrying on for...
Well, we got a surprise guest.
We had a surprise guest.
Which was great. Which is awesome.
But,
as long as you're not fired.
For our Patreon supporters, I want you to stay
and
tuned.
Now thinkspot.com.
Will this be on ThinkSpot? Will my rants be on ThinkSpot?
Anybody who subscribes is going to be on ThinkSpot. We'll get these on ThinkSpot as well. It's a $10 per month support. If you do that, you get not only our monthly Patreon. That was Christina pulling a...
No, because I'm already...
That wasn't, by the way, her eating potato chips, which if you heard crunching, who brings potato chips to a podcast? Couldn't you bring gummy bears?
No, I knew you would be disapproving.
She's eating them.
I get hungry.
Bring a soft bun.
And you need to have some food when you're imbibing, or you...
Anyway, yes. So bonus content for those who support us at Patreon or ThinkSpot is our monthly for everybody. After hours, last call.
And I want to say something about the bonus content.
And then for those at $10 a month, which, by the way, we are desperate for, you get Christina's, sometimes my weekly rant called She's Had Enough.
But those who are our Patreons will... Stay tuned, because when the show is ended, there will be a bonus segment for you where I am going to hold forth on a topic that's so...
Drinking champagne.
And I have had champagne, and I don't care, okay? I am going to speak my mind. Earlier in the show, we talked about this annoying, cringe-inducing bingo game that was sent out on the evening of the Golden Globes. And I'm just going to say that the organization that posted this was funded to the tune of $1 billion by...
No, they got to find out.
I'll say who it is, and then I'll give my rant.
No, No, let them find out. Let them subscribe.
Okay.
We gotta be that old-fashioned woman. You just lift up your skirt, show the ankle a little bit, and then drop it and say, "Stay tuned, boys, for $10. We'll show you more."
I don't want to be a loose woman.
A loose change woman.
So stay tuned.
Okay, well, Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us. And we are looking forward to a great new season 6. Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Keep up with us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. Send questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com.
A big thanks to Ella Ryder, our research and in-studio production assistant, and to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor. And we're proud to be part of the Ricochet Network and grateful to the American Enterprise Institute for allowing us to record in its studio every week in downtown Washington, D.C.
And miss something? You'll find everything you need at our homepage, femsplainers.com, including links to past episodes, our sponsors, where you can sign up to support us, and even to merch. And please don't forget to like us or give us 5 stars on iTunes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.